following is a presentation of KSL Sports. Hello, Cougar Nation.
Top of the key, triple, Richie Saunders, fourth three-pointer of the night, massive make.
Every Monday night, we break down the Cougars' last game and look ahead to next week. Cougar Nation, brought to you by Central Bank. Here's BYU insider Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte on Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio.
Good evening, Cougar Nation. Welcome on into your show. We're opening the phone lines, 801-575-8255, talking BYU basketball over the next hour. Maybe we'll sprinkle in some Super Bowl talk for Jeff, who's celebrating the Eagles championship. They're riding high after taking down Andy Reid's Kansas City Chiefs. Mitch Harper, Matt Baiamonte with you over the next hour. And Matt, BYU basketball, they need to find some answers. Maybe we can give some over the next hour.
Yeah, that was a tough two-game stretch with losses to Arizona. And look, that was dare I say, a good loss. I mean, Arizona's a good basketball team, very capable of winning the Big 12, but on the road at Cincinnati, just a complete no-show in the second half. That was tough to swallow.
84-66, BYU falls to the Bearcats in a road game against a team that BYU dominated a month ago in Provo. So a complete turn of events, a completely different outcome than what we saw in Provo last month. Let's dive into that loss at Cincinnati in our takeaways.
Cougar Nation, takeaways. Mitch and Matt analyze BYU's last week of play and what it means for the next week.
All right, Mitch, let's get into our takeaways. My first takeaway is something I feel like I talk about every single week, and yet it's becoming harder and harder to not connect the dots between this stat and winning. And that is rebounding, where BYU got absolutely blasted for the second game in a row on the glass, out-rebounded by 15 against Arizona and then 15 against Cincinnati. And in both of Cincinnati's wins against BYU as conference members, they've won the rebounding battle. And it's starting to feel like if BYU rebounds well, and it is at least even, or if they win the rebounding battle, they have a great chance of winning the game. If they don't rebound well, then I feel like they have no chance to win the basketball game. 17 total rebounds, that's hard to do, Mitch. And I'm having a hard time not drawing a comparison between the 17 rebounds and maybe a lack of effort when things go south. And I don't want to point fingers because it's only a 2-game losing streak, but when you only pull down 17 rebounds is it's effort in a lot of cases. Sure, there's times where there's a long three that bounces off the rim and you can't corral it. But in a lot of cases, Mitch, it's boxing out your guy, creating the space, and pulling down the rebound. 17! That is hard to fathom. Only 17 rebounds, and they lose by double digits. I just feel like when this team rebounds well, they play better defense. It leads to better offense. But when they don't rebound well, it leaks into everything. And in that second half, they had 8 rebounds in the second half. Single-digit rebounds in the second half. 16 second-chance points for Cincinnati. To me, the game was won, and in this case, lost on the glass because they did not bring it to the rebounding game.
I can maybe excuse the number because of the hot shooting of Cincinnati, 59% from the field, 50% from three. But the offensive rebounds for BYU, only 3 offensive rebounds, and that ties in a lot to effort because BYU had its fair share of misses. Still shot the ball pretty well, 47% from the field, 34% from three. You go into any road game, you'll take those numbers and to feel like you're in a position to maybe win that game. But 3 offensive rebounds for BYU was surprising, particularly with how well this team has been rebounding the basketball. So I think that's a great point about the rebounds and how that's a concerning trend because against Arizona, they were dominated, out-rebounded by 15 in that one, and then it happened again against Cincinnati. To me, costly turnovers continue to be a takeaway for BYU. Only 12 in total, and Cincinnati had 11 as well, but it just felt like BYU's 12 were impactful. Yegor Demon had 2 turnovers, but there were moments that when his turnovers came up that they were momentum killers for BYU and opportunities to maybe cut a deficit. And BYU has got to take care of the ball better. They just have been very poor in turnover margin. They're 11th in the Big 12 in conference play in turnover margin. And when you're a team right now that it's like BYU, where you're outside of many bracket projections, you've got to value possessions and take care of the basketball. BYU's got so many great opportunities in front of them from a chance to boost their resume. But if you're actually going to win some of these games, particularly on the road, you've got to value possessions, and BYU doesn't do a good enough job of that consistently. And that, to me, becomes a growing concern for BYU moving forward.
I like that point a lot. Another takeaway I had, Mitch, was BYU desperately, BYU needs the scoring from Trevor Nell in both losses against Arizona. Trevor Nell only had 4 points, and against Cincinnati, he only had 3 points. A couple weeks ago, people were making fun of me, thinking I was crazy for calling this guy an X Factor, and yet in these 2 losses, he's nowhere to be found. And I don't know if that is offensively they're having a hard time getting his shots. Perhaps defensively they're doing a great job of taking him away. But it's become evident to me that BYU needs his scoring to be a good basketball team. You can't have 3 and 4 from a guy who is one of the best career three-point shooters this school has ever seen. You need his attempts up, and you need makes from Trevor Nell because that's his specialty. He's supposed to complement Yegor Demon. And if he's not getting the volume of attempts and if he's not making 3, 4, 5 threes, this offense, it doesn't flow as well. That, to me, that is just obvious. And you look at those box scores from Trevin, just not making an impact. And I guess you got to credit the defenses for taking him out of the game. But this coaching staff and this group of players, they've got to find a way to get him the shots. 1 of 3 against Arizona. That's just not enough attempts. 1 of 3 against Cincinnati. It's not enough for a guy who is a great three-point shooter, highly accurate, makes a lot of threes. He's going to be a top 10 three-point shooter this school's ever seen. Get Trevor Nell involved at any cost.
And his one make was the opening shot of the game. And you're right. I mean, Trevor Nell has got to be a key factor. You know, BYU's quad 1 road victory at UCF, BYU had 4 players in double figures. Just only having Richie Saunders and Yegor Demon in double figures is not going to be enough for the Cougars. I'll go a little bit different direction, too. I think another takeaway is that BYU's defense is having some real issues. They've given up more than 80 points in 3 of the last 4 games. This was head coach Kevin Young earlier today on his thoughts on the recent defensive struggles, and this thing can get fixed on the defensive end.
I think one, it's playing really good teams that are hard to guard. Number 2, a lot of that is self-inflicted. You know, we're turning the ball over too much. We're giving up too many offensive rebounds. You know, I think on the whole, our half-court defense hasn't been bad. You know, it's just self-inflicted. As it relates to Cincinnati, you know, they hit an astronomical amount of tough shots, long twos, mid-paint shots that don't, you know, for them and for every team historically don't go in. I think they were 12-18. But we got to adjust. You know, we didn't do a good enough job adjusting in the game. But I think on the whole, our defense definitely needs to get better. But a lot of it, in my mind, is coming out of areas that aren't necessarily defensive related in terms of you know, not turning the basketball over, and then, you know, obviously finishing out possessions with rebounding.
I buy some of that commentary from Coach Kevin Young because we've hit on the rebounds and the turnovers. You clean up some of those areas, I think BYU's defensive effort is going to look a lot better.
And I don't think that, though, when you're not rebounding well and you do have the turnovers, I think it impacts the defense. I just think it's human nature, Mitch, where if you're getting killed on the glass and you're turning it over, is your energy as high as it needs to be to get stops? I don't think it has been during this 2-game losing streak. And I think if they can correct those things, it'll directly impact their ability to just be energetic and fight through the difficulties on the defensive end. It's all tied together. I think that's why we love basketball. The defensive end impacts the offensive end and vice versa, and if one side is struggling, it leaks onto the other. We've seen that during the loss, and they got to figure it out quick.
801-575-8255. What does BYU need to do differently to end this losing streak? We want to hear from you, Cougar Nation, throughout this hour because this is your show. 801-575-8255. Answer the question or give us your scorching hot BYU basketball take. We're on the air live here over the next hour up until 7 o'clock. So we'll be taking your phone calls, but BYU's looking to end this 2-game losing streak. And, a week ago at this time, they were one of the hottest teams in college basketball, 4-game win streak. And losing will happen in this league. Some of the best teams in this conference have to navigate some losing streaks. Iowa State a week ago, they were on a 3-game skid and then had a nice bounce-back win against TCU over the weekend. Things can change in a hurry in this conference, but, Matt, it's just crazy when you think there's only 4 weeks left in the regular season, and for a team like BYU, who doesn't have much on the non-conference to point to, you have got to start piling up wins now, and that's why it feels like that loss to Cincinnati was a pretty significant one.
The margin for error is thin, Mitch, and there's a lot of difficult games coming up. This week is difficult. Kansas State at home is no gimme. West Virginia on the road is no gimme. And then looking ahead after that, Arizona and Kansas, they have to find a way to win some of these games where, at the very least, it's a toss-up. And that's what it's going to require if they're going to get to the NCAA tournament. Let's take a break, though, Mitch. We'll get to your question of the day. What does BYU need to do differently to end the losing streak on the other side? Call in 801-575-8255. Cougar Nation brought to you by Central Bank, voted best bank and mortgage in Utah Valley. Visit us online at cbutah.com.
How many things affect your life as much as slow traffic and bad weather? Listen tomorrow morning for traffic and weather together every 10 minutes on the nines on KSL News Radio.
Welcome back into Cougar Nation. It's your show, Cougar Nation. 801-575-8255. Load up the phone lines. And it's been funny, Mitch Harper, Matt Baiamonte with you. People saying jokes on social media. Oh, now it's college basketball season. We've been holding it down every single Monday night since the football season for college football ended. So we've been neck deep in BYU basketball and Big 12 basketball for weeks. But for the people now getting up to speed, Matt, and now that the Super Bowl is over, did you watch that Super Bowl last night as the Eagles took down Andy Reid's Kansas City Chiefs?
I watched the first half, and then I said, forget this. I'm not watching any more of this. And it just got worse in the third quarter. That was one of the most shocking outcomes I've ever seen in the Super Bowl. Not that Philadelphia wasn't capable. They're super talented. But Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes have built up this reputation where you felt like they'd find a way at some point, right? They never found a way. Like, it was, 34-0 at one point? Like, geez, that's one of the most lopsided Super Bowls I've seen in a long time.
I agree. I was stunned at how much struggle that Patrick Mahomes had to experience. And just to see Andy Reid, it seemed like he always has an answer. Yep. And, I wasn't pulling for the Chiefs. I'll admit I was kind of getting tired of their dynasty. But so I was pulling for the Eagles, and I'm happy that they got their second title in I think 7 years now. But how it played out. And I think the whole game, the commercials were lame. The halftime wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. Just the whole Super Bowl event I thought was subpar. I just wasn't impressed with it. The score bug was underwhelming.
The score bug was one of the worst parts of the whole event. That was horrible.
The score bug, everything was just subpar, I thought.
How was Tom Brady? Subpar?
Yeah, there wasn't. Other than his jab at Kevin Hart, I wasn't. I didn't come away feeling like he's worth all the money that Fox is paying him. But anyway, football season is now over. So
don't say it, Mitch. I can't believe it. When does spring ball start?
February 27th.
Okay, we don't have to. All right.
If things really go south here for BYU basketball, we can maybe get in some spring football, Cougar Nations. But you know what, Matt? I don't think it's going to go completely south for this BYU basketball team, and we're asking Cougar Nation, what does BYU Hoops need to do differently to end this 2-game losing streak that they're on? What say you? What do you think needs to be done to get things right for the Cougars on the hardwood?
I've got two things, but my hottest take, because, look, we want to hear from BYU fans. What do they need to do differently, which we're discussing now, 801-575-8255. But you can also just pipe off some scorching hot take. And my hot take is, I think BYU needs to start Dallin Hall, and he needs to return to the point guard role. I think you still start Demon, but you slide him over to 2. And Demon's been shooting the ball better of late, and his attempts are up. He's shooting it a lot more than Dallin Hall is, and I just feel like Dallin Hall takes care of the ball better. You can't even argue that fact if you look at the total assists and total turnovers, Hall's assist to turnover ratio is much better than Demon's. And I feel like get Hall back in at point guard, play him more minutes, let him run the show. That's not to say Yegor won't have his moments where he's running actions as well, but I think let's see what this team could look like if Hall is running the show as the primary point guard.
Yegor Demon, though, is number one in assist rate in the Big 12 through in conference play in assist rate. And then Dallin Hall is not far off at 17th, but Yegor's still dishing the rock at a high clip, Matt.
Not of late, though. That's the problem. Like, if you look at the Arizona and Cincinnati games, Yegor's had more turnovers than assists during those losing streaks, and that seems to be the theme in the losses, where Yegor is turning it over too much and the assists aren't there. And Hall, look, I don't think he was super impactful against Cincinnati. Don't get it twisted here. But 3 assists, 1 turnover. Have you seen a game where Hall is just coughing it up left and right? He's taking care of the ball. And right now, this team needs to value possessions. We heard it from Kevin Young. Yep. Too many turnovers. So I'm not saying don't play Yegor. I think Yegor is actually playing some good basketball. I'm just wondering, does he need to be more in a shooting guard role, get up those 13 to 15 attempts that we've been seeing, and have Dallin Hall kind of run the action? And the thing that we have not seen yet this season is Hall and Yegor kind of running the actions. There's too much my turn, your turn. Where are they both getting involved in multiple situations? I don't know. It's a hot take, Mitch, but I'd like to see what Hall could do having the ball a little bit more in his hands.
Yeah, Dallin Hall's season high in Big 12 play for minutes was 34 against Utah. He had 0 turnovers in that game. His high for turnovers in a game in Big 12 is 3. So he's done a nice job taking care of the basketball. I will say for BYU to in this losing streak, don't let opponents have career nights. Jizzle James, Jamiron Keller, that list continues to grow over the years of guys that just become BYU killers. That was Jizzle James on Saturday for Cincinnati, as he was 1 point shy of a career high. He had 24 points, knocked down a career high 6 threes. It just seems like there's always guys that are always a thorn in BYU's side. Don't allow that to happen. If teams just go for their standard production, so be it. But don't let someone have a career night on you. I like BYU's chances of taking down some of these teams if you're not just getting these superhuman performances from some of these opponents.
That's a good point. I'd also add quickly, too, I think they got to tighten the rotation. In this Cincinnati game, they were desperate. They were pulling for straws. But does this have an 8-man group that you feel comfortable night in and night out? I just feel like the second unit, Mitch, you never know who's going to be hot and who you can rely on, and that's hard.
We got to take a break. On the other side, we'll get to some of your phone calls. We know we've got Linda on the line. We'll get to your call, Linda, and then some more of your phone calls. 801-575-8255. What does BYU need to do differently to end this 2-game losing streak and get back on the right side of the bubble? Because we're only 4 weeks away till this regular season is over. They got to start piling up the wins. Mitch Harper, Matt Baiamonte with you here on Cougar Nation, right here on KSL.
Be ready for BYU Game Day. Download the KSL News Radio app to stream BYU games, plus breaking news during the week. That's the app for KSL News Radio.
Welcome back into Cougar Nation here on KSL News Radio. Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte with you. Talking BYU hoops, and we're taking your phone calls. 801-575-8255. Let's get out to the phone line. Welcome in Linda. And Linda, let's hear your hottest BYU basketball take. Go ahead.
I thought that the first half was better than the second half. The second half was terrible. And I know that there was a time that Dallin was missing. He missed a few shots on the second half when he was trying to shoot.
Yeah, you're right. The second half was terrible, Linda. And what do they have to do differently, though, Linda? What would you like to see from this team?
I'd like to maybe I'm just trying to think if another rotation would help. But I know Trevin's been really good, but it's just like on the road we tend to freeze up sometimes, and a lot of the time, and I just feel like we've got to get something better, and maybe Coach Young just needs to rotate more players.
Thanks for the call, Linda. Appreciate that.
I like the point of the rotation, Mitch, because I just feel like, man, honestly, answer this question. Who are the top 7? Who are the top 8? Like, who's filling what roles? Do you feel like you have a good sense of that? We're 2/3 of the way through the season.
A clear top 7 or 8? No, I don't feel like it's clear, no.
The best teams in college basketball, the teams that make deep runs, by and large, they have that figured out. Now, there's still a little bit of time to figure it out, but, man, you look at the box score from that Cincy game, you're giving 9 minutes to Boscovich, and he doesn't even play every night. Trey Stewart, he got 9 minutes, and look, they were good minutes. I'm not discounting those minutes. I'm just saying, are they now going to become a part of the 8? Like, I just feel like, man, you got to know as a player what your role is going to be if you're going to be consistent. And you look up and down this roster, there's a lot of undefined roles. Like, Richie knows what he's doing. Baiamonte knows what he's doing. I think Yegor's got a defined role. Trevenell's got a defined role. That's 4 players. But after that, like, there's a lot of who's got it on this night, who's got it on that night, and that doesn't breed consistency, Mitch. That breeds bust-out performances like we had from Cannon Catchings in the win against Baylor, but it also leads to performances like this where you don't know where to go. And there's just too many stretches in these games where when you don't know where to go, you don't know what lineup to use, which guys can create and be a go-to player in a tough moment. That's what happens when you don't have that 7, 8-minute stretches where Cincinnati started the half, 22-2? And by that point, the game was over because the hole was too deep. So I'd love to Linda's point, we don't know what the rotation is, quite frankly, the top 8. And I'd like to see that solidified so that these role players, when they come in, they can expect I'm playing X number of minutes, and this is what I need to do. And I just don't know if that exists right now off the bench, and I think that's hard because sometimes guys pop off and have big games, but other times they don't. And during this losing streak, we just have not seen that pop from the role guys.
Let's dive right in a little bit further into these rotations and some of these players and what's trending up and trending down.
Cougar Nation, trending. What's trending up and what's trending down this season.
Those are some good points, Matt. And you brought up 2 interesting names that Cougar fans haven't heard much of this year. That's Mihailo Boscovich. And I will say, those minutes that he gave, and really throughout Big 12 play, the seldom opportunities he gets, Colorado game in Boulder, Cincinnati, he rolls out almost in a, as Kevin Young pointed out in the post game, on the radio post game, it was an emergency situation. They were down and out. They needed some spark. Hey, Mihailo, go out there. Let's see what you got. And he's not shy about getting wound up. In the words of Kevin Young, wind him up. He'll fire off some shots. And I thought he looked pretty good. And I think he's done a nice job in his limited opportunities this season. He was +4 in his plus-minus, one of the few players in this game against Cincinnati that had a positive plus-minus. 8 points, 3 of 6 from the field, 2 3-pointers. First time since Thanksgiving against Ole Miss where Mihailo hit 2 threes. This was Kevin Young on Mihailo earlier today about maybe if he could see more time going forward.
Mihailo's the guy who I've been wanting to get more minutes for. It's been tricky, given the other guys that are out there and have been playing well, but he's somebody that, I do want to get more minutes for. As it relates to Trey, he's a guy a lot like Mawood that can come in and, guard other teams' best players.
That last point that Kevin Young made was about Trey Stewart. But Mihailo, let me ask you this, Matt. Should BYU give him more minutes, maybe in, say, Foos's minutes as a 5, backup 5 to Baiamonte?
I'm not opposed to it because Mihailo is much taller than Foos. Now, Foos has a really long wingspan, but Mihailo offers you something that maybe this group of players needs, which is a little stretch 4, someone who can make an outside shot, because you don't get that from Baiamonte and you don't get that from Foos. Foos is a great low post presence, but there's no perimeter shooting from either guy. You get that from Boscovich. I'm not opposed to it. It's just I'd like to see him, hey, we're going to give you 12 minutes a game. here's the 12.
Yeah.
And let's see what happens. You can't have emergency situations all the time where we're seeing what guys can do.
You wonder, too, when it comes to Boscovich and Foose, Foose is done after this year. And look, Foose is going to be remembered in high regard by BYU fans no matter what happens to close out this season. He was a BYU guy, 4 straight years. That's rare these days in college basketball. But if you get some positive momentum with Mihailo down the stretch, maybe that's something you can build off of going into next season potentially. I mean, again, you can't assume with anyone that you can't just write them down in Sharpie, oh, this guy's back, because you just never know. But maybe that's something that has to be considered here, that long term, Mihailo, if he's got eligibility still after this year, he's a junior, and maybe that's something that has to factor into the equation, because Foose has struggled at times, and some of his moves feel like it's been figured out by some of these Big 12 front courts. It's tough because Foose is a veteran, and when he does create that space, he's one of the most efficient scorers in the post in the league, and he's so strong. But Mihailo just gives you a little bit of a different dimension, and his ability to knock down threes is a welcomed, I think, addition at times, because then you got 5 guys on the court that can knock down the three ball.
I don't hate that, Mitch. My trending up is someone Kevin Young just mentioned, and you mentioned as well, Trey Stewart. I thought those were some good minutes where he was impactful on both sides of the floor. And you have to wonder, too, does he deserve some minutes here to see what he can do? Because in some of these stretches, we've heard Dallin Hall talk about this. He mentioned this after the Arizona loss. When things aren't going their way offensively, that can tend to leak over to the defensive effort. I felt like that happened against Cincinnati again, where the shots weren't falling in the second half, and then the effort wasn't there defensively, and then Jizzle James is cooking and baking, and next thing you know, you're down double digits. The thing I love about Trey is what he is, and the elite skill set that I think Trey has is the same one that Richie has. There's not different speeds to these players. They're all go. It's all gas. You're going to get the effort. He's going to be diving for balls. He's going to be crashing the glass. And honestly, I think you need some of that around a Yegor Demon, a Richie Saunders, a Trevin Nell. Not everyone is wired that way. And if you have someone like Trey in your back pocket who you can throw on a Jizzle James, maybe he should have been thrown on him sooner. Pick him up full court press. I love that Trey is always going to bring the effort, and he's going to lock people down. And there is a place for that. And I wonder if that's something they need to explore a little bit more.
In the 2 Big 12 games where he has received more than 5 minutes in Big 12 play, UCF and Cincinnati, he had 8 minutes against UCF, 9 minutes against Cincy. I thought those were both, impactful stretches where he played. And so you're right. I think that his minutes that he has provided, still limited, have been impactful for BYU in Big 12 play. Real quick before we get to a break, trending down, we talked about it a lot, but for me, it's just the rebounding. I'm just surprised at this point, beyond midway in Big 12 play, that this team's having issues on the glass, because I thought this was something they could hang their hat on. On the road, they'd be an excellent rebounding team. That hasn't shown up. Keba Keita only had 3 boards against Cincinnati. He's got to get back to being that, 9, 10, 11 rebound guy per night if they're going to win games on the road.
3 weeks ago, Mitch, they were top 10 in rebounding margin. They're down to 173rd.
Yeah.
Think about that. Talk about a slip.
That's a telling stat.
In rebounding margin. Wow. For me, it's defensive effort. I just think their defensive effort right now is predicated on if things are working offensively, and that can't be the case. They've got to fight through those frustrations offensively.
Cougar Nation, sponsored by Central Bank, voted best bank and mortgage in Utah Valley. Visit us online at cbutah.com. Last chance to get on board with us, 801-575-8255. You can answer the question, what does BYU need to do differently to end the losing streak? Maybe share your thoughts on the BYU-West Virginia game as well. We're going to preview that matchup between the Cougars and Mountaineers next, right here on Cougar Nation.
Cougar fans, use this radio station tomorrow morning for important news updates. Listen to Utah's most important radio station tomorrow morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Last segment of the show, Cougar Nation breaking down the loss against Cincy, which, Mitch, I think we've broke that one down enough.
Yes.
So let's turn the page to West Virginia, but we'll still take your calls. 801-575-8255. What do they need to do differently to end the losing streak tomorrow, which has a 5 p.m. tip-off. You can watch it on CBS Sports Network. And as always, you can listen to the Cougs right here on the Legacy home, KSL News Radio. I was looking at the box score. So BYU won this game, and this kind of felt like a bit of a turning point last year, that win in Morgantown. Foose had a big game. I thought it was noteworthy, though, Mitch, in that win, they had 48 in the second half. They only played 8 players. And a Tiki only saw like 4 minutes. So really they only played 7 players in that win against Morgantown. I just thought that was interesting when contrasting that against this year's team where it feels like they're north of 10 every single game. They're playing more than 10 guys. Only 7 guys, meaningful minutes in the win last year at Morgantown.
West Virginia has the best defense in the Big 12, at least in terms of or second best defense behind Houston in terms of scoring margin. Their lowest scoring offense. They are a slower paced team. So the up and down tempo that BYU has experienced in recent games.
You said this about Cincy on Cougar Sports Saturday. Low scoring team.
I know. Cincinnati was the worst offense in the Big 12, and then they just lit it up with Jizzle James and Day Thomas, the best names in the Big 12. But I do believe West Virginia, this is kind of their identity where, they are going to be a slower paced team. Now, West Virginia has an outstanding guard who BYU, some of the returning players like Dallin Hall, Trevin Nell, they've gotten a taste of this guy before in the past, or experienced this guy rather. Javon Small, excellent player.
The Oklahoma State guy?
Yes, he is back with West Virginia now. And last season, remember, he put up 24 points per game in the 2 games against BYU. He had a 34-point game in Provo, and he had a 14-point game in Stillwater. Javon Small is probably the best player in the Big 12 this season. I think he's the Big 12 Player of the Year. He's been outstanding.
What? You think?
I really believe so. I think he should get National Player of the Year consideration. He has been elite. Against Utah on Saturday, he was more of a facilitator, had 8 assists. He made 14 points on 5 shots. He was getting to the foul line quite a bit. He has an ability to draw fouls too. So Javon Small, excellent player. BYU has got to find a way to cause turnovers on him. Make sure that he's not as efficient of a player as he has been. He has had some big games this season. They are without their, maybe one of their top players too, Tucker DeVries, the head coach's son. He's been ruled out since November. He's out for the remainder of the season with a shoulder injury. They're hoping to get him back for a medical redshirt next year. But this is a really good West Virginia team who has wins at Kansas. They took down Iowa State. They have a win over Arizona. That was a non-conference game in the Bahamas. So, West Virginia's knocked off the best teams in this league, and they're on their home floor. It's going to be a tough game for BYU.
This is a critical week, Mitch. The NCAA tournament will be secured or lost this week, in my opinion. They're currently 6-6, and you look ahead. Kansas at home, that's winnable. On the road to Arizona, tough. I'm talking next week. After that, you got Arizona State, West Virginia again, on the road at Iowa State, and then you got Utah at the end of the year at home. You got to get to at least, in my opinion, 10. So you got to go 4-4 in the next 8 games. And I don't see them doing that if they don't win at least one game this week. Now, if you're able to get a win against West Virginia on the road, very nice win, and then come back and beat Kansas State, which is one of the top performing teams in the conference right now. Record-wise, they're not near the top, but they're also at 6-6, I believe, in conference play. So they're climbing the standings as well. The Wildcats, you get these two, which they're not freebies by any stretch of the imagination. Tough games, as you've laid out. This West Virginia team is good defensively, good point guard. You find a way to win these, and you get to 8-6 by the end of the week, I think you're in a really good shot. ESPN has them right now at about a 70% chance to make the tournament. They think that their analytical performances are better than the record indicates. And I think we'll kind of find that out by the end of the week, Mitch.
Well, and you compare BYU to some of these bubble teams. I'm watching one right now, North Carolina at Clemson. Carolina's getting hammered. BYU's a good team, and they've shown they can compete against some of the best teams in the Big 12. It's just, putting it together every single night. Let's get back out of the phone line because this is your show, Cougar Nation. John from Salt Lake. What's it going to take, John, for BYU to win tomorrow night against West Virginia?
So anytime to win basketball games, you must control the ball. You got to get the rebounds every time. You've got to get the high percentage shots. You just got to control the tempo. If you don't do that, you're going to lose games. And I think BYU's got to win the next 5, and they have to win them substantially. These bubble teams, a lot of them don't make it because they're pretty iffy.
It's a good point, and I totally agree. The rebounding, man, it is so critical because it one, provides you extra chances to score, Mitch, but 2, it also limits the other team's ability to score. Look no further than Cincinnati's 16 second chance points against BYU, despite Jizzle James. And let that be the last time we mention his name on this show, by the way. Despite his performance, you take away those 16 second chance points, it's anyone's ball game. So, yeah, I think John is dead on. You have to possess the ball, and rebounding. Rebounding is not like a shooting. Like shooting, you can control a little bit the quality of the shot, but at the end of the day, the result, it's not entirely in your hands. And you hear coaches talk about this all the time, Mitch. It's getting good looks. We can live with good looks. You can't live with being out-rebounded by 15. So I think it's a good point by John.
This is head coach Kevin Young on the morale of the team heading into tomorrow night against WVU.
We had a great practice today, and that's one thing that I really respect about this group of players is they bring it. I got on them pretty good in a film session today with things that I feel like are issues that we need to fix, most of which have nothing to do with scheme. A lot of it is just ball toughness offensively, spacing, just playing a little bit smarter on the offensive end. And then, like I said, the rebounding and the turnovers. So I think I was very impressed with the way that they responded to that meeting we had this morning. Thought we had a really good practice today, and I look forward to us being able to carry that over into the game.
Let's see if they can back it up tomorrow night. BYU, West Virginia, here on KSL, 5 p.m. tip. Great show, Matt, and we will talk to you on Saturday with Cougar Sports Saturday from noon to 3 right here on KSL. Have a great night, everyone.